So, welcome to everybody. I'll keep an eye on the door. If somebody is knocking, I'll let them in. Thank you very much for joining. And yeah, I'm really excited to have Ed with us all the way from the US, and yeah, specifically for him to come and share his knowledge with us. He is very knowledgeable in terms of specifically couple finance, but across financial therapy. I just worked through the Financial Therapy Association's level 1 training, and uh, must say he made a huge contribution towards those towards the training as such. So was nice listening to him from that side. In terms of our pre-discussion, also it was so rich, and yeah, so very much warm South African welcome, and in Zulu we'll say Sabona. I see you for who you are. So thanks, Ed, for joining us. And yeah, we're looking forward to what you are going to share with us this afternoon. Louis, also welcome. Nice to have you here also this afternoon. And Rihanna, Annelie, Mandy. So fantastic to have you all here. Yeah, I think I gave you privileges to share screen there, Ed, if you want to share a picture with us. But with this group this afternoon, we can also have a nice conversation in between. And a lively conversation. So fantastic. Thanks, Ed, for making time to have a conversation with us. I think it's so applicable in the work that we do. Is it's in a lot of cases we don't only engage with one of the partners, but both partners. Or even if we've got one partner as a client, they're not living in isolation, and they living in a system, which have a huge impact also on us engaging with our finances. So over to you, Ed.
All right. Thanks, Hendrik. I appreciate it. Welcome, everyone, today. And I'm so excited to be able to help facilitate this conversation. I do have some slides that I'll share with everyone as we go through this conversation. And certainly, I think just feel free to, I don't know, Hendrik, if you want to watch the chat box or just help me watch if anyone raises a hand digitally, I'll do my best to be responsive there.
Yeah, I'll also keep an eye for us there, Ed, so 100%.
And I think everyone should be able to see the screen.
Yes, positive.
Great. So as Hendrik was saying, I am a marriage counselor in the United States. Prior to becoming a marriage counselor, I've had a kind of a funny career path. I started my life professionally as a firefighter, so I ran into burning buildings. And I did that for about 5 years, and then got really interested in personal finance, and ultimately went to work for Vanguard Mutual Funds here in the States, one of the largest investment companies. Got my MBA, certified financial planner, thinking naively, if I just know how money works, everything else will work out. And I was dismayed to learn that just knowing how index investing and tax strategies go is not enough to save myself from financial stress and anxiety, or to have effective communication with my wife around the finances, as well as helping many clients. So ultimately went back to school to become a therapist. Again, I think probably my big learning is all new ventures start naive and innocent for how much there really is. But I've spent the last, I don't know, about 8 years or so working as a couples therapist, and have really enjoyed and been profoundly challenged by trying to understand what makes couples tick, what's going on there. And then more importantly, what do we do to help start affecting more positive change for them around the way that they engage each other with their finances. And so today we'll go through a few different exercises that I will commonly use in my practice to try to help couples get more effective at articulating what's really going on for them. And I hope that these will be fruitful in your own life, and as well as practice of working with folks there in South Africa. All right, sound good?
Thanks.
All right. So we're going to be digging into why do couples fight about money? We're going to talk about the pain that fighting creates for them, what we can do about it as professionals, and then next steps if you think, I want to be able to do more of this type of work. So time for personal reflection. On a scale of 1 to 10, how frustrated are you with money fights? And if anyone's so bold, they can just put it in the chat box. I will just go ahead and own that this morning I had the loudest, nastiest fight with my wife. It was all in my head. She didn't hear any of it. But I started creating this story in my head about summer vacations and why she doesn't want it. And, in my head, I had all these frustrations that were coming up. And so what I know about money fights is sometimes they're not the ones that are happening actually between the people, but it's what's happening inside of your head about whatever perspective you think your partner doesn't have that makes you angry or frustrated. And so one of those really important things is when we're working with folks is sometimes they're having an internal conflict about what's going on with their partner that they haven't yet even been able to fully articulate. So when we're working with couples, one of the big things that we want to start drawing out is their ability to articulate their frustrations with each other in a more effective way. And one of the ways that we do that in a counseling sense is using scaling questions. And we just say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how frustrated are you with money fights? Or if knowing your client and their particular context, you can modify it to something very specific. So you might say, Ed, well, how frustrated are you with summer vacation planning and the money that it's going to cost? And I would have, if you asked me this morning, I would have said a 10. And you would say, oh my gosh. And then you could turn to my wife and say, well, how frustrated do you think Ed is with summer vacation planning and expenses? And she might say a 3. That happens a lot when working with couples, is that they don't always perceive just how upset or distressed each other are around whatever the financial topic that they're working on. And sometimes they don't even always recognize that it's some part about the money, some part about the activity, but it's often this mesh or mixed up piece. And so as coaches and therapists and planners, being able to use these scaling questions to draw out differences and then helping set the stage for a more facilitative conversation about why there's such a difference there on whatever the topic happens to be. All right, so it looks like we got a bunch of chat responses, 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s, yeah. Yes, definitely a lot of internal head fights, right? I think most of us, have learned how to just hold our anger inside, or many of us have. And so that can be where a lot of silent resentment starts building up for couples too, is how to translate what's going on in your head out in a way that's effective and not destructive. All right, so let's see. Now, Hendrik, I'm going to have you probably help me out here with this fill in the blank activity, because what I just realized is I will give you everything in US dollars, and that will probably not translate well to South Africa. So Hendrik, would you mind just reading through these blanks, and you can just put in whatever number may be relevant. And what I want everybody else to do is to just notice what reaction you have to whatever number Hendrik fills in there. Is that all right?
Yeah. So it's end of the month. So luckily, if the first one, you have around about 40,000 rand in the bank. I do not own anything on student loans. Luckily, I'm blessed. Neither for myself or my kids at this stage, I can fund it. My wedding will not cost something, but I've got 2 daughters that's on their way to somewhere, if they're going to go into a relationship, going to get married. So that will most probably cost me 100,000 rand, at least 50,000 rand for each of them. Yeah, my partner just spent 4,000 rand, which I didn't know about, which gave me a lot of thought in my own mind this morning. Retirement savings,
You don't have to give your personal information here. Just make up a number.
Yeah, is X, and I know I need to save some more, so that's the conversation going
Great.
in my head. Financial security is for me to have a passive income of at least 50,000 rand a month. That will is that's the enough figure I've got in my head. Your partner's parents need. They luckily financially well off, so they don't need except for emotional support. And you just hit um, the Super Bowl score. So yeah.
Hendrik, thanks for walking through this exercise. I appreciate you sharing it. I will ask you to privately reflect on what you heard from Hendrik and how you would have filled in these blanks. And my hunch is maybe we can even open up the floor for a few minutes here and people can chime in and say, what were you filling in the blank there? And what did you notice was maybe similar or different to how Hendrik moved through this?
Louis, if I can put you on the spot, you don't mind to be on the spot.
Sure. I think what stood out for me is how brave Hendrik was just to openly share the information. And, I thought, wow, what if Ed posed this to me, and how would clients feel just disclosing some of this information? I think being in a different phase of life, there's different priorities and different numbers that pop up, and probably less important the number, but actually just how grateful you are with a lot of the numbers that you mentioned in the phase of life that you are. So that's kind of what stood out for me.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. The context of the phase of life matters a lot, and you could hear the way Hendrik was responding and framing the questions tells us a lot about where he's at and kind of what's on his mind. And it is funny to try to get people to just be able to articulate their numbers. They're coming to work with a money professional, and then when we start to ask them their numbers, they can kind of tense up, and we can even tense up, and our clients can feel that. And so what we're wanting to continuously work with is this spirit of non-judgment and openness to whatever the person is going to say and however they're going to respond. And so we can create simple fill in the blank sheets that may make it easier for them to just kind of start articulating it. The value is in just being able to name what's actually going on. That's a big part of it. And when you're working with couples, oftentimes there's asymmetry or gaps in the amount of knowledge between a couple. And so part of it is just being able to create a safe enough environment where they can discuss the information. This past week, I was working with a couple where they're really struggling to just get on budget and be coordinated around the finances. And as we were talking about it, we've been working together for some weeks. She said, okay, well, I put some of my stuff in Mint. And I said, okay, well, what are your numbers? And she said, you want me to tell you my numbers? Yes. Well, part of what I realized is there's that social agreement that we don't talk about our numbers with other people. But there's also the awareness that her partner is going to be upset about the numbers because he's trusted her with managing the numbers. And so she's trying to guard against his criticism and his critique. And so we want to continually try to create an environment, from my perspective, working with couples where it's a mutual responsibility. Maybe one person's responsible for managing the execution, but the other person needs to be aware of what's going on. And ultimately, we want to help them move towards a non-judgmental stance of their partner and what's going on. Because when one partner starts to become judgmental of the other partner and what they're doing, the conversation will shut down further and further. It often leads clients into a lot of shame around their finances. And that is the most painful human experience for us to have, is to be in a state of shame, which is, I am bad, I am no good. That's where we can end up psychologically speaking when we start to talk about these different topics, especially if we're going to draw our partner's criticism.
I see Deepa has got a hand up. Deepa.
Sure. Hey, Deepa.
Hello. So I've got like 101 questions concerning this. So I want to start off by asking, at which stage do you actually, in a relationship, do you actually start talking about what your income is? And more dangerously, at which stage in a relationship do you, sorry, okay, sorry, Rihanna. And then at what stage do you actually start talking about what your credit position actually is? Because that's more intrusive than I think what your income is. And because I got married without ever having these discussions, and it was a big issue once I was married. So kind of hit it hard there.
Okay, so the first part I heard clearly was, when do you start to disclose your income in the progression of a relationship? And then the second question is, when do you disclose, what was the second piece of financial information?
What your expenses and your credit. Because in a country like South Africa, we have a huge yuppie generation where credit is so freely accessible, you know, and I'm sure a lot of people are living off credit rather than their income.
Yes, that's a great question. So I don't think on your first date is the time to have that conversation. But, you know, I do think when I start to frame this for folks around intimacy, financial intimacy, is if you're starting to kiss your partner, what else do you need to share about yourself financially? What's the financial equivalent? If you're having sex with your partner, if you're willing to get naked physically, are you willing to get naked financially? Right. So in a more practical sense, what are those actual landmarks? Is as you're dating, as you're moving towards marriage and committing a relationship, getting to that financial transparency is really critical. And so when I'm working with my clients that are entering the dating phase of relationship cycles, you want to start small and test and just see how open are they to talking about financial topics. You can ask questions about, you know, before asking for their income, you can say early on in the dating relationship, are you comfortable talking about your personal finances as if this relationship were going forward? That's going to start giving you a clue, that type of question, as to what it's going to be like in 2 weeks, in a month, 2 months down the road. What we can anticipate is that there will be a lot of people that feel very uncomfortable about disclosing their financial information, especially if they know that they should be doing better, whatever that is, and they're behind whatever that line of doing better. So if we're in the dating market, part of what we want to do is ideally make it okay that you are wherever you're at on your financial journey. But more important, are you open and willing to look at starting to make changes in the way that you do things? Have you tried to start making changes and been successful? Or have you tried to make changes and not made any progress? So those are some softer types of questions that you can start to use in a dating context to get to know how comfortable is this person with their finances. I do think by the time you're getting married, ideally you want to have full disclosure on income and credit and assets. You want to be completely financially open with your partner. That's the ideal. Does that help, Deepa?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So, and Deepa, this will kind of come, this slide actually plays well into your question, is why do couples fight about money? And what I know is that many people growing up in families experience a lot of financial trauma and pain around their money, And so they learn that money is a dangerous or threatening topic to talk about. And so this is why I really frame money conversations through the lens of needing to create relational safety and security first before getting all the numbers, right? So we don't want to force people into disclosure on their financial information until they can feel a sense of safety with you, that you're going to hold that information, you're not going to use it against them, you're not going to judge them for it. Because they've already likely experienced, in many cases, some judgment, some shame, some criticism around finances, or watched that happen in the family that they grew up in. So that can also be a precursor type of question, is how did your family navigate money conversations? Did they navigate? Did they have them? Were they generally open and honest and transparent about their finances? Were they closed mouth or quiet about it? So those are questions more about experience with money that are going to start to elicit kind of some natural responses of, if it was open, they'll probably feel more comfortable to share where they're at on that journey. If it was closed or critical, they're going to shy away. Then it's going to take some more work. So that's where like the work of financial therapy can be really helpful to help couples start to articulate what's going on.
I think most probably, Ed, the thought that's going through my head is also culturally, this could, because that's part of the community, how you grew up, could also have a huge impact on looking differently within cultural rules at financial planning.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Culture plays a major role in financial disclosure and what's personal and what's private. And many of those rules are unspoken. And so what we have to start doing is, in the dating relationship, is start to talk openly about what are some of the cultural rules about financial disclosure and what's personal and private and what's open for sharing. I think the couples that what I'm working towards with all of my couples, irrespective of cultural edicts, and this is where you have to make some decisions, but is full financial transparency between both partners. I realize that there can be religious and other cultural rules that close that down. And that's where cultural familiarity is really important. And you can even ask your clients, because the other thing that I've had to learn is my interpretation of my cultural rules and my client's interpretation of what I even perceive to be the same cultural rules can be very different. So even if we're working within the same cultural context, we want to really understand how is this client particularly interpreting whatever the cultural rules happen to be. And if we're working cross-culturally, then we have to be even more sensitive to be inquiring about what are some of the cultural rules that may be teaching you to not disclose financial information, or to look at it's the man's responsibility or it's the woman's responsibility in the relationship to manage the money, because there are cultural rules usually around gender roles and responsibility as well. And those cultural rules can cross with family experiences around what you actually saw in the family around who actually led the money. So, man, as humans, we start to internalize all kinds of different rules. We have the cultural rules, we have the family rules, we have our own individual experiences, and those things all get twisted up together inside of us. That's also what bogs us down in knowing what to do sometimes around the finances, what's the socially appropriate thing to do. I think that adds some flexibility too, is that many of our rules are social constructs. They're not laws of physics. We're not trying to break gravity. We're working with culturally constructed rules. Sometimes that's harder to navigate though too. So when we have conflict, we feel it psychologically in the emotional sense, the fear, the anger, the sadness, the shame, the anxiety, but we also feel it physiologically or in our body. We're not divided, we're integrated beings. And so anytime that we're going through a money conflict, we feel it psychologically and physically in our body. And so to help get in contact with just how true this is, I would like us to go through another money exercise. And this is another money exercise that you can use with your clients to help them become more connected in their relationship with money. It's called the body check-in exercise. And so what I'd like everyone to do is to see if they can just remember a mildly challenging money memory. Let's start out gentle here. We don't have to go to your most painful money memories. But what I know is everyone has at least some challenging money memory in their past, from their childhood or from their young adulthood or later in life. So we all have at least a handful of them. And what I'd like you to do is, if you're comfortable in your space, is to gently close your eyes. And I'm just going to name the different parts of your body, and I'd like you to notice where that shows up. So starting at the top of your head, coming down through your temples, down into your jaw, down into your neck, down through your shoulders, down into your chest, down into your stomach, down through your pelvic region, down through the tops of your legs or your upper legs, down into your lower legs, and now out through your feet. And as you're ready, just slowly come back into the room and let me know. A few people maybe can just chime in. Where did you feel it in your body? And what sensation did you feel?
For me, it was clenched jaws, Edgar.
Clenched jaw. Yeah. Yeah, that's a very common place, is that the clenching in the jaw, the stress, and that's the physiological response to that money memory. It's just kind of gritting your teeth and bearing through it. So, Hendrik, what I'd like you to do, and anybody else that's listening and felt some distress in their body, what we're going to do now is the next and more important part is we've connected and felt the physiology of it. Is I'd like you to just, again, gently close your eyes and see if you can pull back up that memory and that sense of that sensation. If you felt it in multiple places across your body, just pick one part of your body. And what I'd like you to do is imagine your warmest, most loving hands, maybe the hands that hold a sweet baby or a friendly puppy or something, just, so friendly and warm. And get that kind of sensation in your hands and bring it to that part of your body. And just kind of a sense of acknowledgement that this money experience, whatever it was for you, was painful, was threatening, was scary. And that whatever that was that happened, that particular experience is over now. It's done. So bringing your hands to that part of your body and just letting your body know that experience is done. It's in the past. And just notice and see what happens in your body there with that part of your body. Hendrik, did you notice any kind of shift or change in what your jaw felt like in the association with that memory?
Total relaxation.
Total relaxation. Right. That's great. So that's really a big part of what we know in working with money trauma and so many traumas or painful experiences. We often don't get recognition in the pain of that experience and what that pain was and meant for us. And so it gets stored in our body. Bessel van der Kolk has a very popular book out right now called The Body Keeps the Score. And he does an incredible job of articulating how trauma gets stored in our body. And so we're paying attention particularly to money traumas, and we don't get them to resolution and telling the story of what actually happened and feeling heard and validated for that experience from our own perspective. Hendrik, you used the phrase, I see you for who you are, which is part of the Zulu outlook and culture. Is that, I understand that right? So we're bringing that Zulu spirit to your money traumas, right? We're looking at it from your perspective, not from what I think it should mean or should have been like for you, or whoever that person was, but from your unique perspective. Now, the good news is we also all have some positive money memories, right? None of us have had a completely terrible life with money. Some of us have had more challenging experiences with money than others, but I know every person has had at least one or two positive money memories. And so what I'd like you to do now is we're going to go to the other side, and we're going to become more connected with a positive money memory in our body. And I'll just scan over your body again. So starting at the top of your head, working down into your temple, down through your jaw, down into your neck, down into your chest, down through your stomach, down through your pelvic region, down through your upper legs, down into your lower legs, and now out through your feet. And what did you notice this time in association with a positive money memory? Would anybody be willing to share something that they notice happening in their body paired with a positive money memory? See the chat kind of going here.
Warmth in
Relax.
my face. Yeah.
Yeah. My chest area feels expansive, warmth in my face. Yeah. Right. So powerful shifts here as we consciously activate a different type of money memory. So what we know is when we're working with our clients and as we're going through this and our clients are telling us money stories, we're being activated as well. Consciously and unconsciously, our brain is pulling us up our own memories and experiences related to memory and trying to help us feel coordinated with where this person is going on their story. So that's why this work can be very, very draining if you haven't been able to work through your money history and start to bring more increasing resolution to the story of money in your life. So this is really the heart of the work that I do. I've fallen absolutely in love with psychology's attachment theory. When I first learned about this, it absolutely freaked me out and made no sense to me at all. And so it's been a long journey to really understand the psychology of attachment and its meaning. But part of that journey for me is recognizing the profound impact that my family had on me and my own development of experiences. And for many people, it can feel very threatening to actually consider how deeply their family has shaped their sense of self in the world. The good news about attachment theory and attachment psychology is it's been studied for about 7 decades now. It's cross-culturally relevant, meaning everyone has an attachment system. That's what attachment theory helps describe as humans and part of the broader animal kingdom, we are wired and bonded for connection. And when that doesn't happen in good enough measure, we develop insecure ways of relating in the world. So attachment theory has organized people into 4 broad categories. Those 4 broad categories are secure, anxious, avoidant, and disorganized. And in simple terms, securely attached individuals generally feel self-confident with themselves and confident in receiving care from others. When things don't go well in their life, they can turn to another person for care and comfort, or they can turn internally. This is as adults. As babies cannot self-soothe. This is a common misconception, but babies actually need the care of another adult to help them regulate their whole emotional system. And when they don't get that in enough good measure, it's very distressing for the developing child. About 50 to 60% of the population, depending on where you're at in the world, has secure attachment or will be classified in this category. On the insecure side, there's anxious attachment, which is I generally have a lower view of myself and a more positive view of others. I'm always kind of clinging or people pleasing or trying to do extra work and kind of anticipating negative reaction from other people. And so I'm going to work extra hard to try to get the relationship to work. But even when it does work, I may not be quite as satisfied as someone that feels securely attached. On the other end of the continuum are those that are avoidantly attached. These are the individuals that are much more self-reliant. They have a more positive view of themselves in general, and they are a lower view of others. They've developed a mistrust that other people can really understand their own internal experiences. And so when they're in distress, they're more likely to turn towards themselves and try to figure it out than to turn externally and ask for support. Those with disorganized attachment vacillate back and forth in their patterns of trying to connect, but generally they are mistrusting of themselves and other people in relationship. So I'd like to show this short video here to help kind of really see what happens with attachment and bonding.
What we've learned over the years is that babies are much more capable than we initially imagined, but they're also much more vulnerable. And in Edtronics still face experiment, we get to see both in a very short period. We see the baby and the dad playing together in their routines. There are things that they know about each other and things that they do together, and it's fun. And then we ask the dad to turn away. And when he turns back, to keep his face completely still and not respond to the baby. And the results are almost immediate, and they're devastating. The baby looks to the dad and tries to get the dad to get back into those games. Hey, we were just playing just a minute ago, weren't we? We were having fun. What's going on? And then the baby starts to get frustrated when that doesn't work. So she'll have to look away and look around the room and find something else, and then look back and say, now can we play? And within 3 minutes, the baby has really dissolved. She is trying to get out of the chair. She's uncomfortable. She's reaching out to dad. She's crying. And then we ask the dad to turn away again. And when he turns back, to go back to being regular dad. And it's a joyous reunion. They get back into their routines, the things that they do together, the things that they were just doing 3 minutes before. And the baby settles down and gets back to the comfort zone that she's developed with the dad. What we see in the still face experiment is how able the child is to initiate and be part of the relationship between the father and the child, but also how much she depends on that relationship in order to keep an even keel. And when she's grounded and comfortable, she can explore the world. She can meet new people. She can try new things. And she's got that safe base that she can always rely on. And there's a trust level there. We can only begin to imagine what it's like for babies whose life is like that 3 minutes all of the time. And they don't get that responsiveness, and they don't get any help getting back to an even keel. And the results can be very tragic. They can have trouble trusting people. They can have trouble relating to people. And they can have trouble being calm enough so that they can explore the world and take part in the world. So we know that those initial relationships, that initial responsiveness and interaction between the father and the baby are keys to the baby's success as a child and as an adult.
So I'm just going to pause and allow anybody to respond or ask questions about the video before I go forward.
I see in the chat, unbelievable.
Yeah. This is really powerful stuff. And it's a lot to digest, and just watching this 4-minute video can be quite triggering for us in our own attachment system and our own memories of being cared for, feeling uncared for. And learning to tend for our attachment system and our need for bonding is an ongoing or iterative process. We're fortunate to have so much knowledge now about how the attachment system works and how to help people heal and grow through that. But it really starts to reframe the way that we understand what's happening for people. In the US, and I'm not sure if it's reached there in South Africa, but there's an incredible book called What Happened to You by Oprah and Dr. Bruce Perry. And they really dive deep into this topic as well. And they're wanting to very persuasively change the narrative from what's wrong with you to what's happened to you. Because we know that our mental health is based far more on what's happened to us than on just genetics alone or just a chemical imbalance. Our mental health is predicated on the experience of caregiving that we've received or not received, and the interruptions to that and the recovery or lack of recovery that we've experienced. And so as we're working with our clients, understandably, you may not be a mental health professional, but you can keep in mind that every single one of your clients has a developmental history. They have a history of being cared for and feeling uncared for. Now, the really great news is parents, this is not a message of parents have to do parenting perfectly. Secure attachment is also very clear about, it's not about perfect parenting. It's about the parent recognizing when there's a rupture in the caregiving relationship and making bids to recover or repair, or acknowledge when they've missed a tune, especially as the children are growing and developing. As a young baby, that you can't have that conversational interaction and repair, but you can ultimately figure out, oh, it wasn't feeding that you needed to sleep, or you needed your diaper changed, right? You're constantly trying to figure that out and help the baby get back to a place of regulation and comfort. Growing children require more conversational acknowledgement of dad got upset, dad got angry, dad got scared, dad got frustrated. Here's what we're doing. Here's what happened. Because children are also what's called egocentric, and they will take on fault for things that is not their fault. As adults, we are responsible for providing a safe caregiving environment and teaching children how to navigate their social environment. They are still learning, and yet we can get quite angry at them when they don't follow through adequately. So we want to keep this just even in the back of mind, is this may be a deeper explanation for why people are struggling to move forward in their finances, is their attachment system feels threat or over perceives threat. So I shared a little bit of my own story. I would be classified as anxiously attached. This is part of my own rumination in my story and making things up to be worse than they probably actually are with my wife. And I would just to turn to her and have a full conversation and ask some questions, we'd probably get to clarity, and we will. That'll happen later today or tomorrow, probably. But this has been a big relief in the end to discover and start to work through the attachment system. This builds off of some additional psychological research. The ACE study is something that's very well popularized. You can Google search it and find a lot of information. This grew out of actually research from an obesity clinic where Dr. Vincent Felitti was trying to treat people that were chronically obese, morbidly obese. He would help them lose weight. They would ultimately go back into society and then come back 3 months, 6 months, 9 months later and be profoundly overweight again. When he started asking them questions about their life, what he discovered is that many of them had multiple types of trauma from their childhood. And as they lost the weight, they started to attract positive attention to them. And that held negative associations in their mind because that represented threat for them, that someone might take advantage of me or someone might want to get close to me. And so unconsciously, their overweightness was protecting them from being taken advantage of. I think one possible corollary is as people create financial wealth and financial security, and people start to see that, they might then now have this new fear of, I'm going to be taken advantage of. Right? We're very afraid of being financially exploited. And when you have increasing financial security and people know that, they may want to take something from you or use you in a way that feels not good. And so if you don't know how to protect yourself and to feel confident in your increasing wealth, that can be very problematic. So the ACE study highlighted 10 different types of trauma that children experience. Certainly these are broad categories, and there are some others that they've added in additional research. Again, as non-mental health professionals, what we can be aware of is that many of our clients that are struggling to move forward in their finances, this is not the group that comes and is able to take on your coaching and move forward and actively be engaged. These are the people that get stuck or stall out. They likely have emotional abuse and physical threat in their background. They experience physical harm or witnessed it in the home. They experienced inappropriate touch or fondling in sexual ways or sexual abuse. They had a general sense that their family did not love them. There was not enough food or dirty clothes. Parents separated or divorced. There is a parental physical abuse, problems with drinking or drug use, ongoing or chronic mental illness, depression, and suicide attempts or completed, and household members went to prison. This is a difficult list to take on. And what the research showed is that for each increase or added type of trauma, the health outcomes went up quite significantly the odds of negative physical health outcomes. So when we think about working with people in their financial life, they also have to account for their physical health as being a major source of expense or inability to work. And I'm sorry, I'm not very familiar with the healthcare system there in South Africa, but I know in the US, it is a very expensive system that often leaves people in quite a bit of financial distress. So not necessarily that you're responsible for helping people resolve their trauma, but it is important as a professional that you be able to understand that these things may be in their background. If they're disclosing them, then it opens up the conversation about what does it look like to engage in the mental health care system? How do we find someone that's a trauma-informed mental health professional? Let me just check the chat here real quick.
I think while you're checking the chat, I think there's also a huge opportunity, and I don't know what your experience is, Ed, that, if I talk to the psychologist and therapists locally, they say most probably, or the most of their clients they actually see for trauma or psychological counseling in some or other level, also it impacts their finances. But the therapist and the psychologist do not have the skill to work with the financial stuff, as we do not have the skill to work on the therapy side. So it can actually be a great relationship between us and the fraternity of therapists and psychologists to work together with clients. And I think we will add much more value to our clients if we can work in collaboration with our clients. I don't know what's your experience.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the vision, and certainly the vision of the Financial Therapy Association that you highlighted earlier. Is what we will ultimately want to do is, I love Venn diagrams, right? The two circles, and they've existed separate from each other. And we're trying to get some language overlap here so that the therapist can recognize when they would really benefit from someone that can go deeper into their relationship history with money and what that means and how that's showing up in their ability to make financial plans and financial progress. Conversely, as financial helping professionals, recognizing that this is something far deeper and has become much more of a mental health issue, and being able to work in conjunction with them is really the ideal vision. That's the frontier. There's not great formulas yet for figuring that out and how to do that well.
And I think that's also relationships. I think Louis has got a very good point he makes there. I wonder what the ACE study will look like in South Africa with so few SA children living with both parents, so single parent families. So thought perhaps from your side on that.
Yeah, so I think parental loss is an attachment wound. That's one of the biggest ones. And the sources of parental loss are many. And how do people heal through that, recognize that? What is the meaning that they give to that? Are really important questions to work through. But when we can look through that lens of attachment and bonding and familiarity, it's so important. The baby within the mother's womb is already internalizing the mind of the mother. And so if they lose the mother, that represents a loss of representation. One of the things that attachment theory talks about is that we all have internal working models or mental maps of significant attachment figures. That's what we're using unconsciously to help us develop our initial sense of self and being able to navigate through the world. And so when we lose primary caregivers for any number of reasons, the mind may be looking to have that primary bonding person there, but not be able to find it. And that's the distress cycle. So a lot of what happens in attachment theory work or attachment work can be working on internalizing a new or primary attachment figure that they can connect to. That might be the self, or for some people, that's where spiritual and religious images can be a substitute attachment figure. But oftentimes there has to be some grieving to work through that loss of the parental figure. The other thing is community support is another huge factor to help people overcome that. I know that many of the clients that I work with are disconnected within a broader social system. And so I think, and that might be because of the individualistic culture that we live in, so more collective cultures. I haven't looked at the research and how they navigate parental loss and attachment. But that would be another angle to look at. Okay, so our attachment system is connected with our autonomic nervous system. And our autonomic nervous system is that fight, flight, freeze system that we use. And these systems work to help us maintain a sense of emotional regulation. So as we move through our day, we have a flow of different emotional intensity that's going on. And depending on where we're at in that level of emotional intensity will determine our level of overall functioning. So the window of tolerance is another framework to help you mentalize what's going on with my client or with myself right now. Where are they in their window of tolerance? Again, you can Google search also window of tolerance. There's lots of great articles written about it if you want to go further on this topic. But just even being able to explain this visually to clients as they're navigating their financial conversations is really powerful, because now we have a map. You can't go anywhere without us knowing where you're at emotionally. These emotions are not random. They're connected to your physiology and your psychology. And we know when you experience certain sources of threat, so sitting down and looking at your budget or your savings plan or paying down your credit cards or planning for the long-term future, any one of these money topics can be a source of perceived threat or real threat, some combination of the two. And if we're experiencing threat, we can go into hyperarousal, which is the high energy, anxiety, anger, overwhelm, hypervigilance, fight, flight, or chaotic state of mind. This is where I was this morning. I was in hyperarousal in my mind. I was fighting around. It's like I couldn't quite focus as much as I wanted. I knew I needed to get back down into a window of tolerance and have more of a proper perspective on what was going on. Hyperarousal is that really more severe threat state. And that's when we shut down, we feel numb, depression, passive, withdrawn, freeze, or shame. So when we're working with people, we can be monitoring for these different emotional states, and being able to help them name the different emotional states will actually often start to move people back into this middle range of window of tolerance, where they're grounded, they're flexible, they're open, curious, present, able to emotionally self-regulate. If we're not in the window of tolerance, we're not going to be making effective financial decisions. And so instead of leaving people feeling bad about themselves or like they've made a bad decision, what we can help them start to know is that likely you were either in hyperarousal or hypoarousal when that decision was made. And we know that when you're in either of those states, you don't have access to your full brain. So if people are particularly rigid around their finances, or they're particularly chaotic around their finances, we can know that they're in some state of emotional distress. And this helps us move away from pathologizing or moralizing people as being good or bad. We all make less optimal or good decisions when we're in either hyper or hypoarousal. All right. Is that helpful?
Definitely. Thanks, Ed.
So what can we do about it is we have to, from my perspective as a therapist, is we're all responsible for being on some type of a healing journey, whether that's in therapy or reading books or through self-help programs or online communities. But we also want to be working on our money wounds with empathy. And empathy is that emotional attunement and acknowledgement, self-compassion for where you're at and the challenges that you're going through. And we use that to go through these major areas of personal finance. And whether it's talking about saving and spending, investment and retirement, taxes, insurance, or estate planning. We know any one of these broad bucket categories can send people into emotional distress or relational distress. And we're ultimately, from my perspective, leading people towards financial transparency and intimacy, where they're able to disclose their earnings, bonuses, savings. They're learning how that felt sense of trusting their partner's financial judgment and management. This is not just, I should do this. This is, I feel a sense of trusting with my partner. I was working with someone recently around attachment, and she was very cognitively oriented. She was like, okay, I'm understanding the idea of attachment and what it's like and what it's about. And I said, what does attachment feel like? And she looked at me, she said, I don't know. Attachment and connection and trust is a felt sense of trust. And I said, can you imagine what it was like when you were holding your little baby and that sense of bonding? And she was like, yeah, I can remember. That felt so good. If you don't have little babies, maybe it's a puppy or another animal. That's attachment, is feeling that sense of safety, felt sense of safety. So we can understand that concept of attachment, but we also are wanting to feel the experience of bonded or connectedness. So ultimately, we're moving towards being able to share our fears and shame, as well as our financial hopes and dreams, honestly, with that intimate partner. So going back to Deepa's question at the beginning, financial transparency and intimacy ultimately, I think, is a long game for most people. We're not starting out there. We haven't had it role modeled for us. And so we need someone to explain it to us and then model it for us. And that's what we get to do as financial professionals with empathy and compassion, is we get to mirror for them what it's like to be in a caring relationship around your finances, where there's no judgment or criticism. There's curiosity, there's compassion, there's some education, there's some support, there's understanding. That changes the whole paradigm and their way of experiencing their finances. So living well together is we learn about each other's attachment styles. We understand that people have trauma histories. We care for each other's emotional state. We explore each area of money together, and we're working towards building financial intimacy. And that, my friends, is my presentation for today. I'd be happy to answer any additional questions that you may have.
Thanks, Ed. And you, Anita, thanks for sharing the personal story of yourself there in the chat. Any questions? Perhaps we've got like 2 minutes to Ed, perhaps, or a thought that somebody wants to share. Mary J, I see your camera is on. Thought from your side.
Just a thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, for bringing this into our awareness and conversation. It's deep stuff, and I think something I'm aware of is that in South Africa, we have a lot of people with lots of high ACEs scores. The majority of the people that need help and support are the people that don't have access to it, and those are the people who've got the most trauma. And we've got a lot of interesting beliefs because of that trauma. One of the beliefs I consistently encounter is, I have to own property, because we have this deep trauma around land, which it's all over the world, right? I mean, that's the history of the world and the continents and exploring. But if we can talk about that, we can unlock our clients and help them find a solution that will best serve them. So thank you. This was really, really interesting.
Yeah, you're welcome. And Mary, I just want to acknowledge that the land trauma piece, that's so huge. And it's one that we certainly wrestle with in the United States, and the wealth inequality because of the different civilizations and groups of people that have had control and power. And so it plays out on the sociological level and at the psychological level. And that's always one of the challenges for me, is being mindful of this larger sociological context that my clients are living in, and at times helping them to hold that almost constant and to help them turn inwards towards each other and to figure out, how do we not repeat what's happened out here in our own home. And that's part of the beauty of attachment, is how do we create safety and security, at least within our home and family context, where we're not at odds as we face the external world and all the external economic challenges and history and trauma. How do we work through those together? So, but very, very challenging work for sure. I think it's Juanita. Is that the right way to say your name?
Juanita, yeah.
Yes, that's fine. I've worked abroad, and usually people call me by that.
Thank you for sharing about your own adopted child and the emotional regulation age of 3. And this is where it's really so important to know people's histories and at what age different things happen, because that's where people will often get frozen or stuck. And so when the people are expressing some type of, bring this to the money work, at least, is when people are kind of flailing around or frustrated or overwhelmed by whatever financial situation. One question that sometimes you can use with great respect is, how old do you feel right now? And we've got to make sure we're asking this question from a place of deep compassion and curiosity and non-judgment. But many clients, if you have a good trusting relationship with them, can check in with themselves and they can say, I feel 12, I feel 5, whatever that age is. And then you can have them open up and say, what was happening for you at that age? What did you need?
And also sometimes,
go ahead.
When it happened in the first year of life, then it's so subconscious that it's very intense in terms of therapy to go that deep, and to uncover.
That's right, and that's the voicelessness of it all.
Yeah.
And that's where we really have to work into the somatic or the felt sense, because babies come out of the womb wired for safety and security. And if they've been in the womb feeling with the mother's trauma, not feeling safe, they bring that out into their nervous system from birth. And then if whatever other traumas they may have. And so being able to work with that is very, very significant. And takes a highly skilled clinician to be able to work.
Exactly. That's why I travel to a different province for a clinician who's basically skilled in every modality, and but it's a confidence building process before you can go into the EMDR and really get to deep subconscious level work,
Yeah, absolutely.
From my side, Ed, thanks a lot. And if you didn't read Ed's book yet, it's really a wonderful read. So I can highly recommend it. And it is also offering courses on attachment style through the Financial Therapy Association platform, but you don't have to be a member to join the courses as such. So you can also go and look on his website. So he also offers talks from time to time, which after experiencing him today, you will most probably know it will be worthwhile if you want to pop in and spend a conversation with him. So thank you very much, firstly, for all of you that joined in. We wouldn't have been able to have the conversation if you did not join in. I also see some of my old friends, which is just doing coaching, that joined in. VM, thanks very much for joining us. And Juanita also, which is new to the community, thanks for joining in. Kavendra. And then the old friends that's always here, thanks for joining in. Next month, we've got Erin Skorsky. She's going to talk to us about the psychology of transition. She's busy doing a paper on the transition of family businesses and the impact of the different relationships, etc. Within that, she was one of the presenters at last year's Financial Planning Board's paper presentation. So I think it's also going to be it's a young advisor, a millennial advisor that's going to share her view on the subject. So I think that's also going to be an interesting conversation. So looking forward to that. And thank you very much for your time. And Ed, again, I can't thank you enough. It was really a wonderful conversation for opening up this world to us, like Mary J said. So thanks very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Pleasure to meet everyone. Take care.